Working. Is it working? Okay.
This one as well? Yes.
Yeah. So let me thank before I start my colleagues from Idealist and from the Digital NCP network who organized this session. So this is Marion. She is at the back. Marion Perrin from Hub Brussels and Christian Meinsma from RVO in the Netherlands and myself. We are all NCPs for Digital Europe. But we are also collaborating a lot with Idealist, so I'm also doing the Idealist project. So this is the NCP project for Cluster 4 Digital. And well, actually Idealist made it happen that we can have this session on the Digital Europe today. So the thanks also goes to Edina, because she's the one organizing all this during the conference. Let me show you quickly the agenda for today. Maybe I'll go to this side. Yeah, the welcome has happened. We are going now to have a short presentation on the Digital Europe, just in general, in a nutshell, and I'll give you some numbers. Then Christian will be doing a short introduction on the evaluation criteria of Digital Europe. So I don't know how many of you have been active or handing in proposals in Digital. Maybe you can raise your hands. Who of you has already done proposals in Digital Europe? Okay, so quite a lot. NCPs shouldn't put the hands up now. And then we are getting some insights in evaluation summary reports. So I'm also very curious about that. And after that, we are going to have around an hour where we do have a panel discussion. We do have invited 2 evaluators and 3 people who are doing projects in the Digital Europe. And yeah, we are, well, thank you very much for sharing your experiences already now. So next slide, please. Yeah, I'll start with the DEP in a nutshell. So the Digital Europe is a very young program compared to Horizon Europe. So actually the first call started in 2021, and we are finished with the evaluations of the first work program, and basically at the moment we're in the middle of the second work program. We have, I looked it up in the Funding and Tenders portal, I think it's around 400 funded projects. You can see it in the results pages of the Funding and Tenders portal. So that seems quite a lot, but compared, as said, to Horizon Europe, that's not so much. So I think there is some experience existing, but well, there are probably still things that have to be changed, have to be aligned, have to be improved. But we will maybe hear some recommendations later on from the evaluators or from the project holders themselves. So what is the Digital Europe basically doing? So actually it's there to support the digital transformation, mainly for the businesses, for the citizens, and for public administrations. So we always say it's supporting where the market fails. To reach the goals it sets himself, there are some main objectives. So the Digital Europe wants to support also the competition, I mean to be good in competing globally. So there are other countries, other areas in the world who spend a lot of money in advanced technologies. So Europe has to improve here. Then the Digital Europe, as a first program, I think it really tries to pool resources together. So there's a lot of talking about co-funding and co-financing. Then with the Digital Europe, we also aim to regain control over the European value chains. So just to ensure the digital sovereignty, technological sovereignty. And yeah, and of course, I mean, that's probably a main thing in Digital Europe, so it addresses the societal challenges as well, the economic and societal challenges. So you can see in the Digital Europe, there are many different thematic areas it's targeting. So to just mention a few, it's the climate, health, mobility, public administrations, public services. So it's quite a challenge as well for us as NCPs to be experts in all those areas. And it might be also a challenge for the proposals, I guess, to meet the relevance criteria in the proposals if you're probably just developing technologies. So this is, maybe we come back to that later on by talking to the evaluators as well. Yeah, so the big goal is to get organizations, businesses take up digital technologies And there is also a strong support to SMEs. So we do have the EDIHs, which were installed 2 years ago. And yeah, they are mainly there also to spread the information about the program and to let SMEs test their technologies or test technologies others have developed. And I think, yeah, the SMEs are of major importance to the program. Yeah, how it all relates. The Digital Europe is, of course, not a lone-standing program. It's embedded. Actually, it's in the middle of everything. So, well, it's connected to, and the slide just shows the major digital-related funding programs, like the Horizon Europe, which is there to develop the technologies, to do the research on the technologies. The Connecting Europe facility that provides actually the infrastructure for the deployment which happens in the Digital Europe. And altogether, the programs should support reaching the goals we set ourselves for the digital decade. Yeah. Yeah, some numbers for you. The budget is around 7.6 million euros in the Digital Europe for 7 years until 2027. It's without the budget for the chips. That's new, but since we were talking about the past now, because the evaluations are only on the past projects, we thought it's not that important. But remember, there is the CHIPS Act now also included in the Digital Europe as a 6th strategic objective. So actually, the biggest part, the biggest share goes to high-performance computing, but the Digital Europe works a bit different than Horizon Europe, or it's well, Horizon Europe also doesn't implement everything via the European Vision. But a lot of money that comes from Digital Europe is basically implemented by other funding programs or other schemes, like the budget for high-performance computing activities. This is implemented via the joint undertaking of EuroHPC. Then we do have a big share of budget going to artificial intelligence, cloud and data. We do have the third biggest share on the cybersecurity, and then we do have the very important thematic areas for the advanced digital skills and the deployment projects in the Digital Europe program. Okay, regarding the success rates, they are quite high. So if you compare it to Horizon Europe, actually we could say now, oh, we are satisfied, so let's sit down. I mean, it's perfect. Yeah, they're quite high because it's a little bit different to Horizon Europe. So the topics in Digital Europe, they have a very specific target group. And you better know who should submit the proposals in your country than you probably do know who should submit proposals in your country in Horizon Europe. So, well, actually, I looked it up. The Cyprus on this, I mean, we only target 25 countries here, but Cyprus is the most successful country here, so congratulations. And also regarding return rates, I think the countries are very satisfied in participating in the program. The Digital Europe also has the aim to target or to reach the widening countries. I think we are quite good in that as well. Yeah, I'd like to ask later on also maybe the evaluators to put this to give this another perspective. Also, we have some experiences in Horizon Europe with us as well, so maybe maybe they can compare it a little bit. Okay, now we have numbers on, just to give you a feeling of who hands in projects and where does the budget go. So just 2 diagrams telling you the participation per objective, which means all the organizations participating in Digital Europe are for 50% participating in cloud and data and AI topics. Yeah, that's correct.
Participation rates.
The participation rates. And the second one is related to budget. So around 30% of the budget of funded projects go to companies. And that's the blue part of the diagram. And I think it's around half of this budget directly goes to SMEs. This should just tell you that SMEs also can get direct funding under the Digital Europe program. Yeah, I think that's enough numbers. At least for me, it's enough. So I'll give the floor now to Christian, who is telling you more about the evaluation criteria.
Thank you, Daniela. I'll just go to the other side. Try not to be in the light and the camera there. Thank you for the presentation and a lot of numbers. I will go later bit in a lot of words, not numbers. But before doing that, in a bit we're going into some insights of the evaluation summary reports and then into the panel. But before that, we thought it might be wise to have a small refresher on the evaluation criteria of the proposal so that we are all aligned on that and we know what we're talking about. Below you can see the evaluation criteria of the written text of the project proposal. So this is not about admissibility and eligibility, just looking at the key elements of the project proposal, which is categorized in those three categories. In general, it is good to say that a proposal should be, of course, clear, measurable, realistic, achievable within the duration of the project. Going into each one of them. The first one is relevance. And here you can already see clear difference compared to Horizon. The first category for Horizon is excellence, with Digital Europe that is relevant. So excellence for Horizon is more on research excellence, and for Digital Europe that is relevance in the sense of how relevant are the activities and your objectives related in your project towards the topic text, but also towards their contribution to the long-term policy objectives and strategic objectives of the European Union, European Commission, such as the Digital Decade program that was mentioned, but also the whole vision on the twin transition on digital and green. Depends also per topic, which is then described in the call document, some specific elements such as reinforcement of the Union's digital technology supply chain and resilience to financial obstacles. That really depends per topic and therefore per project. This was the first part. Second element of the written text of the project proposal is the implementation element. Again, a good remark comparison to Horizon. Horizon also has implementation, but for Horizon, implementation is the third element and not the second element. Implementation goes into maturity of the proposed action. See it as the technology readiness level, which is often with Digital Europe a bit higher than with Horizon Europe, but also how it relates to the market, the soundness and efficiency of the implementation plan, the exact implementation plan with the specific tasks and work packages described somewhere else in the proposal, but this is more the description of how sound it is, and of course the capacity of the applicants or the consortium to carry out the work. So does the consortium members complement each other? How is going to be a bit the division of work, who has which speciality, etc. And also the geographical coverage of the consortium. Last category, impact. Impact is all about, you can assume, what kind of impact are you going to have on society with your deliverables and how are you going to communicate that? So the achievement of the expected outcomes and deliverables, as well as the communication and dissemination of those outcomes. The competitive, how much the outcomes help in strengthening competitiveness in Europe, and of course in general the contribution of the results towards society. With certain topics that, for example, touch more upon on the energy transition or sustainability, then your impact on environmental sustainability is also very relevant. But again, that's why the star is there. It really depends on the topic, and that you can find that back in the call document. Some final points on the evaluation criteria. The scoring, and I hope I'm going to say it right, or the evaluators are going to burn me down in a bit. So let's see. Proposals are evaluated and scored against the award criteria. in every category you can get maximum 5 points, and you have a minimum passing score of 3 points per category. I believe this is different than Horizon. With Digital Europe, all the categories are all the same in like heaviness. I believe with Horizon, one category is weighted more. All projects are awarded in those different categories and are also compared towards the other projects that have been submitted in the topic, and proposals that achieve a score greater or equal than the threshold will be ranked within the objective. And so if you have a minimum, if you don't pass the minimum score, then you're below the threshold. Also, the Commission looks at, with their selection of the projects that they're going to fund, in, of course, the scoring, but also the program priorities and the available budget. Questions we can do at the end at the panel, probably, so we'll just move on with the presentation. Some insights from evaluation summary reports. Every project is evaluated, and the evaluators make an evaluation summary report, which is the report on the project, where it's defined which score they have per category, and also some comments on how well the project has described a certain element. With the NCPs, we've looked at 811 of these evaluation summary reports of the evaluators, of 811 different Digital Europe submissions. We counted frequently used words per criteria, filtered out standard words such as the or whatever those types of words that are less relevant. And then we start like, hey, what can we observe? First one, we put it in a nice word map. This was the whole point of, you talked about numbers, I'm going to talk about words. What can we observe here? Well, there is quite a clear observation here. I'm not going into the colors, that is way too deep for today, but just into the words that are shown. How bigger the circle and how bigger the word is, how more often it comes back on average in all the evaluation summary reports. And you can see here one big clear word, long-term policy objective, also related to relevant policy and synergy. And here is then, of course, the observation that how well or not well you described your contribution to long-term policy objectives of the EU and relevant policies might be a bit important. Second observation is the count of the words on synergies. So how well or not well you described the synergies with other EU programs or initiatives such as digital innovation hubs. We're not going too much into conclusions. That's not this data what it's for, just more in observations. This is relevance, then you're probably interested in, oh, I need to talk more in the microphone. Then you're probably interested in the second category, which is implementation. You could already guess it a bit. The word package in relation to work packages is probably quite high in word count. I believe the word task is actually filtered out in here because it's just a quite generic, often used word. What the main observation here is that the word package in combination with management structure and decision-making mechanism is shown quite often. And here you can make the observation that, yeah, how well or not well you describe your management structure and your decision mechanism towards regarding work packages and the overall project is mentioned quite often in the different evaluation summary reports. Last category, and I find for this analysis. Now this one actually the most interesting. Of course, you can imagine deliverable as the word, which is important impact, but I want to put a bit of attention to the word shortcoming here. Compared to the other categories and within the corpus of text of the different evaluation summary reports regarding impact, the word shortcoming is coming back more often. This, not drawing conclusions, but this could be the observation that within impact, this category might maybe be more difficult for people to write, and then more shortcomings are seen. I'm really wondering what the evaluators later on, if they recognized it or not at all. This might be interesting. The second observation is the words of target audience and range that often in their reports is a reference to how well or not well target audience and impact range are defined. It's a very initial analysis that we wanted to show you, more on observations, not in drawing conclusions, but might still be useful for proposal writers. This was my presentation on.
So thank you, Christian. You give us a lot of food to think about. And I would like to welcome now our panelists and our evaluators and our project holders to join the floor, please. And you can sit wherever you want. Yeah, maybe the project holders here and the evaluators on the other side. Okay.
It's a small room.
Yes, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself. And may I start with you, Kim?
Yes. Hi, I'm Kim Davis. I'm from Norway. I was for many years an NCP for Horizon programs or the framework programs. I've been an evaluator, a reporter. I've been a reviewer of projects. I've been on committees, et cetera, et cetera. I've been around a long time. That's why I have wrinkles.
My name is Paul Cunningham. I'm from Ireland. I advise governments on policy and strategy related to technological innovation with a particular focus on low resource environments. I'm affiliated with universities in Namibia and Wales. I'm a former society president of VP conferences and a former director of IEEE, the world's largest technical and engineering community. In terms of evaluations, I have been involved in both international and national funding programs, particularly in Europe and in Africa. And I've fulfilled most of the roles that you would have within a European framework program type context. So I hope that my contributions today will be informed by that.
Thank you. Can you go ahead? Thank you, Chiara, please.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Chiara Venturini. I'm head of digital transformation and economic development at Eurocities. We're an association representing a little over 200 European cities of 250,000 inhabitants or more. And we are currently involved in two Digital Europe program projects, both under the umbrella of the Living in .eu movement that promotes digital transformation at regional and local level.
Sorry, it's very hard to hear what you're saying at the panel.
Okay, okay.
Hi, my name is Hans de Kank. I'm co-director of FARI. FARI is the AI for the Common Good Institute here based in Brussels. It is a joint university institute. It's very recently established 3 years ago, thanks to the Next Gen Europe program. And it actually acts as a sort of an RTO, embedded RTO, for the Brussels Capital Region Innovation Program. So we also get support from the local innovation agency. And we successfully contributed to several Digital Europe programs, because that's what the ambitions are for us, to actually interface the academia with local innovation stakeholders like public administrations and local companies. We are part of the European Digital Innovation Hub, Sustain.Brussels. We are part in a Digital Europe project, TEF, Sitcom.ai. And we also successfully participated in a Digital Europe project, which is called Digilong, which takes place in the e-health environment, collaborating with e-health experts from our university. So yeah, in the very short period of time, we were already active in Digital Europe projects, which is one of the main, let's say, funding objectives for our institute.
Hi, good morning. My name is Wim de Kinderen. I'm responsible for European affairs at Brainport Development, which is the regional development agency of the Eindhoven region, as well as in the city of Eindhoven. So I'm working for both organizations, but I have a regional task, so I'm helping stakeholders in the region to apply for European funding at large. And I've been involved in the successful preparation of 6 DEP projects in the last year.
Many thanks. So, okay, one is turned off. So many thanks. I will get back to you guys later. I will start with our evaluators, and I will start with you, Paul. So, in your experience as an evaluator for Digital Europe, what do you think? How well are the evaluation criteria understood by the evaluators?
I think the first thing we need to realize is that DEP is quite a complex program that's evolving from its foundations more around infrastructure now to applications and wider impact and take-up. DEP is very good in terms of, and I think this is true generally speaking of Horizon Europe as well, in terms of detailed briefings are provided in terms of the specifics of calls and also the evaluation criteria. And in many cases, units will also provide a matrix. Now, whether or not that's provided to people who are submitting proposals or not, but it's certainly available to all evaluators in terms of specifying exactly the areas that they want them to focus on during that evaluation process. I think we need to accept that DEP is complicated insofar as the proposals tend to be multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, or intersectional. And that's also reflected by the representation of experts insofar as you have experts from different disciplines. And one of the key roles that a rapporteur has in that kind of environment, for example, is reminding those experts that while they are God as far as their particular disciplinary perspective is concerned, they may not have the same insight and they may have not the same lens or approach of their colleagues in terms of what they will prioritize and what they will identify as being particularly promising or perhaps being particularly deficits of proposals. So I think that it's more to do with the fact that evaluators need to understand that while their perspective is entirely valid, the perspectives of their colleagues is equally valid and may not align either positively or negatively with theirs. So I think a lot of the issue relates to trying to get people to understand that process. Once they do, the first meeting tends to be quite complicated, depending on how experienced the people are, because the Commission does have a policy of having a certain percentage of new evaluators that have never participated before. So you've got a mix of people who know or should know what they're doing, and people for whom this is new, and people behave differently in those kind of environments. I think it's also important to think about the fact that previously we were not asked to address budget issues. That wasn't our business. That was something the Commission would look at afterwards. And I think that's something that people are still coming to terms with, that they're now being asked to give their opinions in terms of whether or not budgets are appropriate. I think it's easy sometimes for people to fall into the trap when they're asked to their opinions about things like that, is, well, that partner looks like they have a huge amount of the budget compared to that partner. Except then you realize that one partner is from Finland and one partner is from Greece. And the economics of labor, for good or for bad, are that there are different cost structures in different countries. So trying to get people to appreciate that is something that's important. So I think getting people to focus more on allocation of resources, whether that's appropriate, whether or not the budget that's requested for travel is understandable because they have to do multiple flights to get to a place as against somebody who's living where the meeting is taking place. So, nuances like that. I think also the lump sum issue is something that people are still coming to terms with. And sometimes the discussion around lump sums can come to a full stop very quickly because people don't really understand the issues at hand. Kim, is there anything you want to add?
Well, the other thing I was going to say about the evaluators is also, the DEP is a new program, and so the evaluators that are being brought in to evaluate projects come from Horizon Europe. They come from Horizon Europe. They come from CEF, for example, the Connecting Europe facilities, et cetera. So there's a big cultural difference there that sometimes can be quite difficult to resolve. So, there's still growing pains in DEP.
Anything else?
No, I mean, when we come to the Q&A, I'm very happy to engage with any pros and cons that people would like, or any issues you'd like to raise, okay?
Okay, thank you. So, well, since the program is pretty new to all of us, to the evaluators, to the proposals, to the NCPs, is there anything you, from your insights into the evaluation process, you could tell or give the NCPs with them on their way to how to best support the proposals?
I have a list.
She's always prepared.
It's quite interesting because I've also done evaluations for Horizon Europe, and it's, to a certain extent, it's not all that different. But one of the first things I always tell people is you got to read the work program. You need to read the work program, the topic that you're interested in. And by what I mean by that is you need to read it in looking at not how can I fund my company or how can I fund my services or whatever, but more how can my expertise or what I do well answer the needs of that topic or that call. That's how you have to look at it. So that's the first thing I would say. The other thing is, of course, start early. I've been in a couple of DEP applications where one of them we wrote in 10 days. It was absolutely hell. We did get it, but there were lots and lots of comments that we now have to take care of that if we had had more time wouldn't have been comments. And that's the other thing, is that the evaluators can now give recommendations to how you should change your project, which is a big difference between Horizon Europe. The next thing is, when you look at this topic and you say to yourself, does my expertise meet these challenges? You need to also ask yourself, will my company or will I actually benefit from working in this? Or is this going to be a hell, again? And is the work fun? Is it something I want to do? So I think all of these things are really important. And the other things I can say is be brief and concise. And also, evaluators have to read a lot. So the more clear you make it, the better, using good tables, good charts, good illustrations, things like that. And again, the budget is tricky. And I come from Norway, it's really expensive up there. You say the budget, you add a line that says, the budget may look wonky, but we pay everybody living wages, therefore it's high. No, you don't say that, but you say, our costs are different than they are in Greece. You just need to make that comment so that people know.
I would, generally speaking, encourage those of you who are not NCPs, but people who are actually involved in proposal writing, to consider volunteering to be evaluators or rapporteurs. The financial compensation is 15 years out of date, but the real benefit is the quality of the people that you get to work with, the insight that you gain from the understanding the process, and also the insights that you can capture during the panel meeting when the DG Home or whoever is the policy agency responsible, some of the issues that they bring up can give you very, very useful insights that can be very powerful in terms of your own preparation. And the last thing I would add to what Kim said is that while you need to be brief and succinct, I'm a contrarian, so I would say that you should start from what they're asking you for in every specific and write a comprehensive story and make it a story. Do threads so people can understand how things are connected, because, as Kim says, a lot of the prep is done beforehand. The amount of time that you have to do the evaluation is quite short relative to the density of the material that you've got. You have a finite amount of time, 90 minutes to 2 hours, to do a consensus meeting with 3 experts and a rapporteur and a PO and an observer and anybody else who happens to be around at the time. So My advice would be, if you were to start with all of the specific sub-criteria that they highlight are important. Also remember that in DEP there can be some specific issues that are specific to an individual call that may not be in calls that you've been involved in before. And those are actually critically important. If you can hit those buttons, that will make it easier for the evaluation team to say yes. And they want to say yes to excellent proposals. So help them identify that you actually have given them an excellent proposal. So if I were writing a DEP proposal, and who knows who might twist my arm in this regard, I would start from writing a comprehensive but analytical document that could end up being 120 pages. We all know that you have a finite, much smaller number of pages, but if you start from something where you know that you've hit all the buttons, you've written it in such a way that the pieces are connected together, people can actually see, maybe you give little use cases as you go along to help people understand, tables and figures that were mentioned. That's critically important in terms of the storytelling element. And then in the last 10 days, you start taking that 120-page document and editing it down to whatever length that call is. And then you make sure that you keep the thread of the story, so it's easy for people to understand why they should be interested and why this is relevant and why you're the best team in the world to possibly do this, particularly where you have international partners, where it's very often that they will not get funded. So you really have to tell the story of why they should be funded as exceptional funding. And then in the last 10 days, you're working down to that finite number of pages that you have as submission. At least that way, you know that you've given yourself and your colleagues the best opportunity because you've hit all the buttons. And particularly watch out for those things that are very call specific that may not have been in-depth calls that you've seen before. I hope that's useful.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Kim. And thanks also for mentioning the possibility to participate as an expert in the evaluations. So on the Funding and Tenders portal, you can sign up as an expert. You can put your profile there. And, well, the Commission uses those databases to find the right experts also for the Digital Europe program. I'll switch now to our project holders. And I'm going to start with you, Chiara. At Eurocities, you do have a lot of information related to projects in smart cities. I don't know where to stand. I go back here. and digital transformation. So how would you assess the current level of participation of those municipalities or those public administrations in the Digital Europe program? And do you see, or where do you see the challenges, or where do you see also the benefits?
Yeah, so first of all, can you hear me all right? Yeah, I hope so. Okay, thank you. It's always challenging for me, a handheld mic, because I'm Italian. I need both my hands to speak properly. But I would say the main challenge that we see for cities and local administrations to get involved is that they're very interested in projects. They also are faced with a number of budget cuts, so it becomes very, very important for them to find other sources of funding to finance all the projects that they want to do. The challenge is that sometimes they don't have the resources to participate in projects. Project writing is extremely resource and time intensive, especially when it comes to digital transformation. Cities don't necessarily have the in-house expertise to write competitive proposals. And then there is also a matter of sometimes low awareness of the opportunities out there, and that is why, as Eurocities, we try to use our role as a platform and as a network to disseminate information about the opportunities, and we support members with their proposal writing. This is, by the way, not something that we see just in projects, but more generally in terms of participation, we see that cities from Eastern and Southern Europe are less engaged sometimes in the work of the association, just going back to that resource challenge that I was mentioning earlier. And sometimes I have a feeling it can be also a bit of the language barrier. Now, on the plus side, although there are obviously differences at local level, in terms of needs, cities are very alike to one another, especially when it comes to digital transformation, because again, they are all facing the challenges of digitalizing public services, trying to understand what kind of carbon footprint impact this digitalization will have on their energy bills, and trying to find ways of not leaving vulnerable groups behind so that they do not inadvertently make the current digital divide even worse than it actually is. So that means that the replicability of successful project is very high. Before I joined Eurocities, I worked in industry associations where we had projects that were more related to the chemicals and advanced materials sector. And the success of those projects cannot always necessarily be applied in other sectors because it can be very specific to how that particular chemical, that particular material reacts. But once you have a successful digital transformation project in a number of European cities, very often you can then take it and bring it to another group of cities. So the real opportunities lie in the successful replicability and scale-up potential of those projects.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
I think Kira mentioned something extremely important, or Kara, sorry, and that is underserved communities. I think if, as part of your storytelling, you can explain how digitalization can engage at the base of the pyramid, that will be very powerful, and that can be something that will make your proposal stand out. It also helps with the replicability because there are, maybe there are differences in terms of constituencies, but there are traditionally underserved communities all over Europe. So there's wonderful opportunities to scale those kind of initiatives.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I just remembered what was said yesterday, that it's also the job of NCPs and of the whole communities to also share the best practices in those areas. So, I mean, if you're in a municipality, you probably want to talk to another one who has done all that before. So may I switch to the research now? You, Hans, you're the researcher. How are you actually facing the challenges in having the Digital Europe more focusing on all the work done after research, actually?
Correct.
How do you deal with that in proposal writing? Well, we see now that you're applying in Digital Europe as well. You're successfully applying.
Yep.
So what general advice would you as well give to adapt to this change as a research organization or as a university?
Well, I think we saw the statistics, and it was about 25% of participation from research institutes. It would be very interesting to see how much of this 25% are really RTOs and how much are really universities. So I'm very keen on looking for that numbers, because that's, given my background in having been working for several RTOs in the past, that was something that also was the ambition of the two universities in Brussels to engage with the FARI Institute as creating indeed an interface institute to enable the research community to delivering services. And this was one of the, let's say, also keywords that you didn't, but it was on there. And yesterday in the panel on EDIH and TEF, it was also brought forward that was a main challenge in different EDIHs to turn, or let's say engage with researchers and to actually make the switch for also experts and professors to get into that service mode. As you know, also in universities, there are always entrepreneurial researchers and professors, and it's key to find them and to connect them. And those who already are involved in very multidisciplinary Horizon projects, for example, those are the ones that you need to find. And that's the ones that you can engage, but you need to facilitate them. And you need to help them and actually bring other experts on board to actually create service delivery. Service designers, for that matter, people who are capable of giving training, lifelong learning programs, for example, or support research in developing proof of concepts and demonstrators to make things more tangible, and who are used to collaborate with or in an industry context to support companies. So I think this additional support is needed towards the researchers, but secondly, you also need to know, because of the fact Digital Europe is new, it's also new to the technology transfer offices of universities, for example. And there I see that, for example, NCPs could play an important role to also, let's say, educate TTI offices, because it's new to them. You have also the challenge of the co-funding schemes that is different for the different calls from time to time. So there are universities and RTOs, of course, who are already used to that. But I see also in the consortium building that for a lot of universities, this is an additional complexity You're also working on a higher TRL level, so it's immediately about, you know, if you collaborate with companies, it's about valorization of IP, very faster than they used to do. So it's also, I think that's another challenge towards research institutes. It's really having the TTI offices on board to this new beast, let's say. Yeah, you will always find entrepreneurial, service-oriented, impact-oriented researchers and experts in your research organization. It's just a way of, you know, facilitating them, educate them in also the proposal phase and so on, and also have the administrations and mainly TTI offices on board. So that's my key takeaway.
Thank you. So, well, we take with us the message also for the NCPs to support the universities in that direction. So then may I switch now to you, Wim. Well, you have a lot of experience in working with SMEs. So how do you assess the current level of participation of SMEs in the program and also other commercial entities? Yeah, what do you think? Is there a way they could better engage with the program, or is it already well established?
So I'm serving a diverse audience, including SMEs, not only SMEs. I think you already referred to the graph in your presentation. I don't know if it was a choice or you just forgot, but the most interesting graph, you just skipped it. That is who is actually applying. And that is the 25% SMEs. So when I was learning about the DEP at the time, like this is the new program, I thought, okay, this is for companies, it's deployment, etc. I think there's a big difference between working for companies and working by companies. I mean, the companies themselves. And you see that DEP is working for companies, I think. And there, the 50% funding rate is just a big killer. That's just a fact. I was mentioning I've been involved in the successful preparation of 6 DEP projects, which are running. Number 7 was the one I needed to go shopping at public entities. It was on strategic skills for short-term courses for strategic skills, something like that. I tried to delete it from my memory. And the reason why it didn't work was because I'm working for a Dutch company. So in the Netherlands, we have the incredible luck, and thank you to the Ministry of Economic Affairs, the Ministry of the Interior, that there is a national co-funding program. So the Netherlands defines a number of calls, not all calls, also through a bottom-up process, so a consultation bottom-up, and then linking it with national policy, and then defining which calls are we going to provide with the additional co-funding. And that is how we, I think, succeeded in scoring very important, relevant projects for our own regional strategy, or company strategy, allowing non-profits to serve the company base. So in that way, we really engage with companies and work for companies. I'm talking about data spaces, I'm talking about the EDIs, I'm talking about the TEFs, so twice each. We're running in our region, but that's all being run by non-profits. And this is what allows us to work to serve the company base. This is a big recommendation for all the other member states. This is something we're going to see in the next programming period a lot, I think, that regions and countries are being asked to jump in, but everybody really needs to prepare well. And I know on the Dutch side this was really already started years ago, but it really pays off. So, yeah.
I mean, what Wim said really resonates with me. You know, I lead an SME, I also lead a research and policy organisation. And it is a significant barrier in many cases from a strategic planning point of view to have to put up 50% funding. I can understand historically why the Commission did this. You know, it was close to market. You didn't want to, you know, do market movements by advantaging certain organisations against others. So I can understand the historical preference. But I do think that in the days of trying to bring digitization to businesses, to cities, you know, to the broad community, we need some more of those co-funding type opportunities where you're not, you know, disadvantaging the market, but you also need to be realistic that if you want to have meaningful SME participation, expecting them to have the upfront resources to fund 50% where you can't have a profit margin in anything you're doing is too much for many people, particularly those that are on the cutting edge and are bleeding through funds and looking for the next funding round. They simply can't afford to take the risk, and in many cases the funders won't fund them if they know they're involved in research because they don't want to fund the research.
Well, thank you. So
Thank you.
just one more word. I mean, co-funding is probably the major topic also of this event. So it keeps us busy in all the member states, and we hope to share the experiences as well between member states on how to deal with it and how to really handle it with the support of the Commission, of course. So I'll hand over to Christian.
Yes, I have an idea, Daniela. Can you stay with the microphone here? Then I'm taking this microphone to the public, because I assume you all must also have questions for our amazing panel. So any hands for a question? Please also say your name and your organization when I give you the microphone. Questions? You're speechless. Of course.
Thank you. My name is Juro. I work for TNO, and we work a lot with Wim about those issues. So I would have a practical questions, listening just to all the advice. One of the big issue is the restrictions on the pages, and just see when we want to build a narrative, we quickly, we actually have something like 30 pages for the narrative because of all the spaces which is lost by the templates. And one of the big issues is the description of the activities, because the description of the activities is within a table, which is inside a column. So as soon as you start to be too extensive, you actually lose a lot of spaces. So what would be your advices and recommendations on how to make this description, how to address this, both from the experienced people, but also how do you review that? Because we end up having often shortcomings comments on the evaluation saying, this is not described enough. Yeah, we don't have the place to describe it enough. So what would be your advice, and how do you address that?
Find a good editor.
I think go back to what I said at the start. I recognize and I appreciate that we all have these page restrictions, but if you were to start by writing, if you didn't have a page limit and you were trying to sell this and you knew you were going to get 100% funding, if you just had an excellent proposal, you would start with something that was very comprehensive. I gave the example of 120 pages. You tell the story, you work around the template, you respect the margins, you respect the restrictions of font size and font type and things like that, and then incrementally, how do I pare this out? Think of it in terms of a pitch if you're an entrepreneur. You can't expect that you're going to have 20 minutes the first time you talk to an investor. So you have to narrow that down to 120 seconds. So how do you take your 20-minute pitch and how do you synthesize that into 120 seconds? I think it's exactly the same challenge. Because if you take it from the point of view of making sure that you hit all the buttons that you have to for that call, that you've explained briefly but succinctly what it is you're trying to do, how that's aligned with the call, then it's an editing process, as Kim says after that. I'm sorry that there's no shortcuts. It is, it's like alchemy in a sense. But I think if you were to start with a comprehensive answer to the questions and then edit that down for the size restrictions, you're more than likely to find something that will make sense to people, because people aren't stupid. The evaluators also understand you've got these restrictions. So if they can understand the premise of what you're trying to do, even the pernickety ones will be persuaded by their colleagues that yes, they've actually explained what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and why.
Thank you for the answer. All the way here in the back, we have another question.
It's not actually a question, it's a comment on the question that you did earlier. Actually, I think there are two schools of thought when you're describing the tasks. One school of thought is that I'm putting all the description of what I'm doing there, so it ends up long, but comprehensive. And the other school of thought is that while you describe your methodology in the text, you describe most of the things that you do, and then you cross-reference to the tasks, and then your descriptions at the tasks could be short, okay? But you have to link, and you have to say that I'm doing this and this and that, and then you can see that in a parenthesis at task there, 1.1. And then in task 1.1, you can have a very short description, and then you can get you can respect the page limits. Thank you.
Any responses on this remark? No?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a smart approach. You want to duplicate, or reduce duplication as much as you possibly can, but you also need to make it as easy as possible for the evaluators. And I'd be very interested in this side of the table, you know, commenting on this. You need to make it as easy for them as possible to follow the story, because nothing causes more resentment than, yes, it's there, but I had to look for it and it was in the wrong place. And yes, my colleague embarrassed me by pointing out it's on this page and I missed it because I was looking in the section where it should have been. That's where people end up getting bad reviews. So keep it simple, stupid, but also make it easy for them. And I think the idea of linking, and also instead of saying the same thing twice, because you're going to have a task description that should be sufficiently detailed so people understand what you're going to do, and then reference that as part of the storytelling. That's a very, very good way of communicating. But I'd be interested in what my colleagues think.
Indeed. Any remarks for the other side, from the other side?
Well, I will just give the example of our process of the proposal writing on the EDIH, which for all of you involved, it was a long process because it was already announced back in 2020, so we had a lot of time to think about it. But I have to say that once actually we figure out how that the financing would work, specifically in the EDIH and the link to services and so on, this really helped, I would say, from that perspective, to build up the proposal, like actually suggested here, to make the necessary references in our proposal, you know, from the body text to, let's say, tasks and deliverables for that matter. So I think for our point of view, let's say, starting with the most difficult part, meaning the budgeting, was actually at the end of the day, let's say, a good starting point to actually make sure that the cross-references through all the proposal was right. So that's how that we actually ended up to actually have like a comprehensive proposal. But it's just our experience that we have.
Just one additional thought, and this sounds like idiot territory, okay? But in a number of recent calls, experts have said, I don't understand what this organization does. We're not supposed to go and look outside the proposal. You know, so if you don't explain in part A what the organization does, don't be surprised if people think that you have capacity gaps and things like that. So just a small little thing to add.
We have another question here in the back.
Thank you. That's a very soft question, I would say. Do you in any way take into account cultural differences? I was once in a company where we had a board members from Venezuela and Finland, and we had to interpret their answers in very different ways. And I'm just saying that maybe you answer things in different ways because of some cultural differences. I know maybe stupid and simple is a good thing to think about, but do you ever think about complexity like that?
I can answer personally, and the answer is no. And the reason the answer is no is because the proposal should not be a single person's effort. It should be a team effort. So a lot of that should have been reviewed during the proposal writing. And the same thing with the evaluators. We all come from different backgrounds, both in terms of education and cultural and everything else. So that's the world we live in. So do we all of a sudden stop and say, oh, this is led by an Italian, they have to use a lot of hand gestures, so therefore they're not here. I mean, no, we don't do that.
And speaking as an Irish person, we've adapted to be able to use hand motions with one hand instead of two. But that's, for different reasons. I've spent most of my professional career working in low-resource environments, particularly in Africa, for example. So sociocultural difference, socio-ethical differences are something I'm extremely sensitive to. But as Kim says, the proposal, I've read three different types of proposals, and I've been involved in consortia that I wish to God I'd known at the start what I knew at the end, and I never would have done it to myself. But there's the type of proposal that's written by one entity about their goals and everyone else is a passenger, and you make the best of it that you can. There's the truly team effort where you have you take into account the perspectives that different stakeholders can valuably provide, and you have a very nuanced, going to your story, you've got a very, very nuanced story to tell. And then you have the worst of all worlds, which is you write that section, I write that section, you write that section, and it's a total goddamn mess. So I think, Kim mentioned editing earlier, and I think having somebody who can take that lens of what's the storytelling element? How can I tease all these things together? And then the other thing I'd suggest is actually use the evaluation template and, do a blue team, red team. Here's the proposal as it is at a certain draft stage. You guys are there to tear rips off it. You're looking at it from the point of view, you do not want this to be funded, so you're looking for all the flaws, you look for all the criteria and sub-criteria, and you slaughter it. Then you take that lesson back and you swap. Instead of being the blue team, you're now the red team, and you do the same thing. And I think that's a very, very good way of doing two things. One, it means that everyone has to buy into what the vision is, because otherwise you won't be able to do this in the first case. So you don't have somebody having passengers or somebody who's been authoritarian with the whole thing, and therefore there's going to be no benefit to your organization at the end of the day of being involved. But it also means that at the end of the day, you have such a clear vision of what you're trying to do. Trying to simplify, to your question, trying to simplify down to the number of pages actually becomes easier, because layer by layer you're peeling off, that's extraneous, that's a distraction, they don't understand what this means, this is core, and then how do you dress it up to make sure it's addressed in the call? I hope that's useful.
You had an additional?
Yeah, just to go back to the, not so much cultural, but just a small point about language. I also think, keep in mind that probably not most of the evaluators have English as the first language, and you're not writing a proposal to show off how smart you are. You are trying to keep it simple and understandable. And one thing that we try to do when we write proposals, for instance, that we will have the content expert put in the work packages and what the proposal is going to do, but then we'll have somebody from either the project or the comms team have a look, somebody who doesn't have the content expertise, to do a sanity check. And if that person comes up back and says, I have no idea what it is that you're talking about and how this works, then we have a problem, and we know that the evaluator might also have that same issue. So just try to keep it simple. And then again, going back to the editing part, also have a look at the language.
I just want to complement what you already said from the point of view of evaluators. And I think that from my experience, specifically with the DIH project, but also with the other Digital Europe proposals I'm involved with, even more than in Horizon Europe and other proposals, I've now the experience that, let's say, it's even more a joint effort in the writing procedure. And I'm actually grateful on the limitations because that enforces you also to do that. And I think a second thing that also helped in creating this, let's say, common narrative that maybe the proposals in DEP are more eager to get to, is that what also helped for us is to, get in touch also with, network organizations, your support, not just getting a support letter from, but also involve these, close stakeholders, EN, the local network organizations like Chamber of Commerce networks and so on, to also involve in that narrative building. And because it's, at the end of the day, more service-oriented and implementation-oriented, and that really helps to define then what the actual impact needs to be of these proposals.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Danny, and for the DEP NCPs. Are you planning a proposal check, events and things like this as a service?
For the Digital Europe now, you mean? Yes, we're doing this with the Horizon Cluster 4 already. Yeah, I mean, the plans are there. The project is not running yet. It's not evaluated. So, but anyway, I mean, all NCPs with experience can do that on a national basis as well. So actually, it shouldn't stop us NCPs supporting our proposals not to have a project, a transnational project yet. So yes, in Austria, we are doing it already.
This was more or less the content of the last slide of this session, but we'll reiterate it then again. Still, thank you for the question. I actually have a question myself to Wim, as in the ESR analysis on the word count, one combination of words came back a lot with relevance, which is the long-term alignment or not well alignment with the long-term policy objectives of the European Union. I believe you also work as a policy advisor. How do you think do you think it is essential for participants to understand the policy landscape of Europe to contribute well to the Digital Europe program?
It certainly helps, I think. Also depends on how serious the program itself takes this argument, but I would be fully in favor because that's a personal opinion maybe, but also we try to take that as an organizational opinion. If you're only doing the project for the project, why are you doing it? I mean, you keep yourself busy for a few years and then you get your salary, okay, also nice, but I mean, what's the real impact? So we try to I try to stimulate organizations only to apply to those projects that really fit our long-term agenda. That's why we are so much investing in these data spaces and the TEFs, for example. Especially the TEFs is really crucial for what we try to do in the economic development of our region. And then policy-wise, there's a revived discussion, let's say, on technology infrastructures on the European level. So if you play on those cards, it helps. And what I didn't mention in my first intervention, but why do I think we are successful? Prepare well and organize well. The Netherlands was quite influential in the whole EDI design, colleagues of TNO in particular. And then there are networks, Chiara already mentioned Living in EU, which was very instrumental in having been successful in a few of the projects I mentioned. So the other example is the TEFs. That was so unclear that I think we were lucky to be one of the first ones to apply. And I don't know, because I'm not involved in the actual writing, but I'm involved in the reviewing, so all supportive of all the messages the colleagues here said. But in the AI matters, I think the evaluators used a lot of the recommendations because I think we had to reorganize quite a bit of the proposal that was positively evaluated.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that an answer to your question?
So just to follow up on what Wim said and what Kim said earlier, I do think that one thing that is attractive from my point of view in terms of the DEP program is that it is possible now to provide feedback on the evaluation summary report that does include ways of potentially increasing the impact of what the projects are going to do. Because look, we shouldn't be doing projects for the sake of doing projects, leaving aside the economic imperative otherwise. You know, the simple reality is the scattergun approach is the reason why we have projects that when they end the funding, the project ends. If that's the case, why the hell did we do that in the first place? That's not a strategic investment. That's like picking and choosing apples and saying, you're a nice apple, so until you wither and die, you know, you get some water. You know, I do think we need to be looking at, you know, my fundamental philosophy would be, you know, you've got finite resources, leaving aside whether you're 50% or 100% funded. If you've got finite resources, what is your mission? How does your mission align with what the opportunity of DEP can provide in terms of helping you accelerate your mission? If it's strategic, submit a proposal and do it well. If it's not strategic, keep on looking around or look for another funding model. Just going back to something that Hans said earlier, because I think it comes back to the storytelling element that I introduced at the start. I very much agree with his approach of the consultation with the stakeholders and things like that. And I mean, I haven't been involved in DEP, but I've been a coordinator and I've been a principal investigator and a co-principal investigator for many projects over the European funding cycles over the years. And some of the best proposals that we've done were built out of consultation with key stakeholders that we were trying to serve their interests in the communities they serve, and then did essentially a bottom-up approach. And in some cases that met the call. In some cases we engaged with NCPs, and they were instrumental in terms of saying, look, here's a set of constituencies, these are some of the issues they have, and we were successful in terms of getting a number of calls included in the work program. You know, so you should be looking at this from a strategic point of view, and you should also be looking at it from a community point of view. If you've got insight that you're capturing from the stakeholders that you serve, that is not reflected in the current work program, but could influence the next work program, stand up, go and talk to your NCP. Arrange a meeting where some of those stakeholders can explain from their point of view what their perspective is. And I've always found that, you know, all you need is 1 or 2 NCP champions. I was very fortunate with the Irish NCPs, and then we got support from a number of other countries, and then things move from there. But if you have a story to tell that reflects a constituency that's underserved, don't be afraid to say, look, this is something that is not served. DEP could have a key role. This is how it could be done. And here's some sample text that you could use as a starting point. You might find the Commission services more responsive than you might think.
Thank you. This was a very, believe, very adequate last remark from your side. Do you have any last tiny bit as a final remark from your side?
I mean, read the goddamn call, work out what they want, work out what they want is what you want. If it's not, don't submit a proposal. If it is, start early, write the most comprehensive essay you've ever written in your life that tells why this is important, why you're the right people, and why it will have impact and continue after the funding envelope is over, and then edit, blue team, red team, get the stakeholders that you're going to serve to criticize it to hell, be embarrassed in public, and then you end up with a proposal that gets a 15.
Thank you. Also for the other panelists.
Wait a minute,
one
I want to say one thing.
No,
Wait.
for all the panelists, one final remark or recommendation. So also
Okay.
for you.
Have fun.
Clear statement, have fun. Thank you. For this side, one final remark or recommendation for the people here in the room.
I know Hans needs to leave for a site visit, so maybe you want to go first.
What I was going to say, one last advice is indeed, I think, from a research organization point of view, I think make sure that you get the right people inside the research organization on board that already are up for the task. Don't sell it, let's say, as just another funding channel. Make sure you have the right people on board inside your research organization, and they're definitely there. So there you go. Thank you.
Yeah, just very fast. I think look what has been done before, especially for the Living in You movement I mentioned earlier. We have a role where we also have to showcase forthcoming projects and new digital solutions that will be developed. So have a look at what has already been done so that you don't duplicate, reinvent the wheel 5 or 6 different times, and look what is already out there that could help you in your communication and dissemination part.
Yeah, and I would say stick to your own agenda. And if you do, maybe the 50% is easier to digest.
I want to thank all the panelists. Give them a big round of applause. To close the session, then you can all go. This session was made possible by the National Contact Points for Digital Europe. We are here to help all participants in their whole process of writing proposals, from discussing the work program, discussing feedback about proposal, final review, but also some legal and financial advice during the whole grant agreement procedure, and depending also on the country, helping with a national co-funding application. You can reach out to us via our email addresses. We're from Brussels, Austria, and the Netherlands. You can recognize the NCPs from the yellow on their card. Thank you.